Hello, I'm Kyle Morrell, and today I'll be speaking to you about contemporary rhetoric and expanding the theory into my own contemporary sense. First, I'll talk about classical rhetoric, a little bit about classical rhetoric. It was popularized by Plato and his apprentice Aristotle. It was the first look at how individuals can be persuasive through speech and or writing. And it's been changed multiple times over the past 2,300 years. And it eventually became to what we now know as contemporary rhetoric. So contemporary rhetoric is a study of rhetoric that interacts, changes, and conforms with the dynamics and the societal norms during a particular period of time. It was popularized by Chaim Perlman, Kenneth Burke, and Stephen Toulmin in the early 1900s, and essentially gave new mediums. Through which we believe rhetoric can be persuasive or effective, as well as some new tenets and concepts to be learned from this new rhetoric. Now, Kenneth Burke never received a college degree. He essentially laid the foundations for this new rhetoric. He stated that rhetoric is rhetoric no matter through what medium it is, and he laid the foundations for dramatism, saying that art imitates life just as life imitates art. Chaim Perlman and Stephen Toulmin both expanded on Aristotle's theory of dialectic and how argument is persuasive, and Stephen Toulmin created the Toulmin model of argument, which many communication studies scholars know and learn early on in their careers. Some of the common tenets of contemporary rhetoric are the changes in rhetorical situations than what had been known in Greece 2,300 years ago. Aristotle intended rhetoric to be strictly through oratory or writing, and with the changing times, we now believe that rhetoric can be persuasive and effective through more than just speaking and writing. It can be effective through images, songs, film, nonverbal cues, you name it. If it's sending a message, it can be effective. It can be persuasive, and it can motivate. Secondly, contemporary society has become far more complex than what Greece had been 2,300 years ago. Whereas communication had been very lateral through people only in common social class. Today, communication can flow up and down, laterally, you name it. It can go any way. People are much more complex how they interact with each other, and that's that. And thirdly, their audiences have become more dynamic and comprehensive. The speaker doesn't necessarily make the audience anymore. The audience can make the speaker. Audiences are not finished or immutable, and they can change with observations and tests. Audiences are now comprehensive to more culture and contextual items than what they had been 2,300 years ago. Now, contemporary rhetoric, even though it's less than 100 years old, it still needs to be changed because of the changes in society that have happened. Globalization is one of the huge factors that needs that calls for contemporary rhetoric to be changed. Along with globalization, there have been the emergence of identities and identity rhetoric. There have been people identify themselves with labels, which they hadn't done in Greece in 2,300 years ago. And this all stems from the digital expansion of society and community. This hadn't been seen 100 or 2,300 years ago, which we're now seeing with the expansion of electronic media. Now, this expansion raises a couple questions for me. In the next couple slides, we'll be answering if self-held identities hold new rhetorical ground than what they did 100 years ago. We'll also be answering to what effect does participation of community have on the transmission of information and persuasion. And finally, I'll be answering to what degree, if any, do societal movements contain rhetoric. So on to the first question, I'll be answering, do self-held identities hold new rhetorical ground? And I believe the answer is yes. And that's because of my concept of identity assimilation rhetoric. This can be defined as a discourse in which the orator or performer intentionally compiles a wide range of individuals. And when explaining this identity assimilation rhetoric, we have to be aware that today people identify themselves by many different labels or identities. And with those identities come presets of how those people think. People can identify themselves as Democrat, feminist, gender fluid, Republican, gun rights activists, you name it. If they give themselves a label, they often follow they often have preset ideas. Now, take for example, when we're trying to persuade these groups of people or multiple groups of people, we can look at Bud Light's People of All Genders commercial of 3 years ago. It's a commercial with Seth Rogen and Amy Schumer. And it essentially says that people of all genders, not both, all, should enjoy Bud Light. This is significant because of the gender fluid culture. The culture that believes in gender fluidity. Out of Time magazine, Jacob Tobia states that gender doesn't have to be defined in rigid terms. It can be a spectrum. Now, whether or not all individuals in the world believe that, the fact that Bud Light stated people of all genders should enjoy their product, they assimilated an entire group of people through what they identified with, what they believe is important, and attempted to persuade them with the simple word, all. And it was very effective. It showed up multiple times in many studies with gender fluid individuals. Now, on to the second question. To what effect does participation of community have on the transmission of information and persuasion? And for this, I'm going to look at the use of social media and instant messaging, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, you name it. So any social media website, any instantaneous mail, video, small clip. Those platforms are more available than what they were 100 years ago, if they even existed 100 years ago. Films existed, but short video clips necessarily didn't. Today, anybody can make a short video clip, and anybody can watch those instantaneous pieces of discourse, like I would like to call them, and they could be persuaded by those. An individual can send out a 7-second clip to an entire community of people or a controlled group of people and be persuasive to them. It doesn't have to have a huge effect at the moment, but it will stick into that individual's head for a while, and that person can identify with what that message was, according to Evan Spiegel, the CEO of Snapchat. Evan Spiegel stated that there's no gap between online and offline in this generation. So when we see something online, we can remember it when we're offline. And that instantaneous discourse can be effective to multiple communities around the world, depending on who it's sent to and depending on how they receive it. And finally, the final question is, to what degree, if any, do societal movements contain rhetoric? And for this, I will look at the recent event of Colin Kaepernick's actions. As many people recall, in August 2016, Colin Kaepernick began kneeling during the national anthem of NFL football games. And this caused a big stir. It had gained him many enemies and also gained him many supporters because of what he was doing it for. And I believe, and in my concept, I defined this as purposeful contention. He took the societal norm and opposed it in order to obtain a goal, and his goal was to, excuse me, I'm losing my train of thought, to get people talking about a problem he saw in society. Now, this could be used in multiple ways. It can be looked at President Trump's run bid for presidency. He contended many people in his own party. He contended people in opposing parties. And that contention gained his supporters, his enormous support that eventually won him the presidency. And the final example of this purposeful contention is I'm going to combine the two examples I just used, is a couple weeks ago, President Trump cut a bit of funding to Meals on Wheels. And in response to this, Colin Kaepernick made a donation to Meals on Wheels. Donald Trump did an action, and Colin Kaepernick purposely contended that. And in that contention, he built himself up to be he made himself be seen as a hero, and Donald Trump seen as a villain, obtaining his goal of showing the problems, air quoting, problems in contemporary society, end quote. And finally, let me just recap. In this extension of contemporary rhetoric, I looked at the effects of identities and how they can be used as persuasive devices in contemporary society. I looked at instantaneous discourse and what impact they can have on contemporary society. And I looked at purposeful contention and how that has been made predominant with the last 6 months even. So, in closing, we look at contemporary rhetoric as the study of rhetoric as it conforms to the dynamics of the 20th century. And we expand that into the 21st century, instantaneous discourse, identity assimilation rhetoric, and purposeful contention. Thank you very much for watching my video, and have a good day.